So what is the day of Sol in Korea? Just like our New Year, based on the solar Gregorian calendar, Korea celebrates the first day of the lunar calendar year in big fashion.
응? 어서 와. 설날은 처음이지? Usually celebrated on the second moon after the winter solstice. The day of Sol or Sollal can either mean the day of the unfamiliar, being the first day of the new year, or the day of age, since traditionally all Koreans gain one more year on that day. Mais avant de discuter des coutumes associées à Sollal, jetons un coup d'œil à l'histoire de cette célébration. 동양의 12지신에 따르면 2024년은 청룡해이며 새로운 60년 주기의 시작입니다.
Hello, nice to meet you. I am QI, a guide at the National.
So I am at the National Museum of Korea, and they had this really fun idea where they identified among their immense collection the representations of the blue dragon throughout Korean history. In an agrarian society, the coming of spring means the beginning of a new farming cycle when new crops must be planted. This is why in many Asian countries, the period before spring is a time of rest and celebration. And Korea is no exception. In fact, festivities associated with the Lunar New Year in Korea have been recorded in ancient Chinese sources, dating back to the 7th century in the Shilla Kingdom period. So in front of me, I have a book called The History of Goryeo, which refers to the medieval period of Korean history. This native Korean book confirms that Sollal was one of the 9 major festivals at the time. Cette tradition a continué jusqu'à la période moderne, mais non pas sans de vrais obstacles. Au tournant du XXe siècle, les Coréens ont subi une répression brutale sous l'occupation impériale japonaise de la péninsule coréenne. S'en est suivi une assimilation de la culture coréenne à la culture japonaise pendant près d'un demi-siècle, processus que certains qualifient de génocide culturel. Durant cette période, la célébration de Sollal fut interdite et les Coréens furent obligés d'adopter le Nouvel An solaire, suivant l'exemple du calendrier grégorien que les Japonais avaient adopté depuis l'ère Meiji. Finally, in 1989, after a series of authoritarian Korean presidents, the celebration of Sollal was reinstated as a national holiday in order to remove the remnants of Japanese colonial rule and to promote Korea's cultural tradition. So we are now in Gyeongbokgung, the central palace of the Joseon dynasty. And in the same complex, we also have the National Folklore Museum that will help us understand the customs associated with Sollal. So first of all, wanting to be fresh and swaggy on Sollal, Koreans would wear their solbim, meaning new clothes. Traditionally, this would be a hanbok like I'm wearing right now, but these days it can be any type of new clothes.
Next, while wearing their solbim, younger Koreans perform the sebe, the act of kneeling to the ground and bowing deeply to their elders, while saying "Sehe 복 많이 받으세요." In return, the elders give words of wisdom, and more importantly, money, back to the younger ones. Ensuite, manger la soupe de gâteau de riz, appelée Dokguk, est une tradition très importante qui permet aux Coréens, culturellement parlant, de vieillir d'1 an, puisque traditionnellement, tous les Coréens grandissent ensemble d'1 an lors du Seollal. Les gâteaux de riz, ou tok, sont coupés à l'allure de pièces de monnaie pour assurer une année prospère, et la soupe savoureuse est souvent accompagnée d'œufs frits, de viande et autres légumes. Excepté la soupe de gâteau de riz, une variété d'autres plats et de sucreries sont aussi préparés lors du Seollal. While gathered in family, it is also customary to play Yunnori. This simple and fun game is one where teams take turns throwing 4 sticks in the air. The way that the sticks land determines how far the player moves around the board. Although other games can be played, Yunnori is usually the game associated with Seollal.
This here brings so many memories. This is where I proposed to my wife 10 years ago.
I also used to give tours of the palace, but it's not every day that I'm back here dressed in hanbok, so I simply wanted to share with you this memorable moment of mine. Anyways, back to Seollal.
Finally, and arguably the most important part of Seollal is the ancestor worship ceremony, or charye.
Food corresponding to the 5 traditional colors are prepared and served as gifts for one's ancestors. These are placed on a table along with the ancestors' favorite food and items, in front of which a solemn rite of respect is performed, including bows from family members. According to kids, however, the best part is eating all the food after the ceremony. It is indeed an important part of Charye, where the ancestor spirits are present and the family receives their blessings.
So I wish that this quick video helped you build on your Squid Game inspired knowledge of Korean culture and gave you insight into the celebration of Seollal. I wish you all a happy new year of the Blue Dragon and 새해 복 많이 받으세요.